Hey guys, welcome into episode number 11 of the DangerSports Podcast. Today, I have another one of my before the draft specials. I'm going to be talking to you about my top 25 big board. So this will be the top 25 players in the draft in order, but it is not a mock draft, to be completely clear. This is who I think the best 25 players are. Not necessarily where they're going to be drafted, but who I personally think that are the best 25 players in this draft coming up. This has changed. I have not been able to put one of these out before, but I will say this list has 100% shifted. There are some guys that I've grown on, and there are some other guys that I've fallen on my board. So I'm going to break that down a little bit here as well, along with the main guys here. So let me know what you guys think. But here, let's get started. So first off, we have Caleb Williams, the quarterback from USC. I think he'll be the number one pick. In fact, I think it is pretty much the Commanders are the first pick at this point, because we basically know that the Bears are taking Caleb Williams at number one, and the USC quarterback has all the attributes, everything. He has the arm strength, he has the mobility, he has the escapability out of the pocket, he has the ability to play within structure or out of structure. He also is a heck of a quick release. He has such a quick release. As soon as he wants to throw the ball and he sees somebody open, he's able to get the ball out of his hands with lightning speed. He doesn't have like a hitch in his wind-up. He can kind of just really just throw as soon as he wants to. I think there are some things he needs to work on. His footwork is one. Probably to stop playing so much hero ball. He plays a lot of hero ball, which gets him into most of his turnovers come off of him trying to do too much. And he is a little bit loose with the football when he's trying to run around, make plays. Occasionally he has a important fumble problem that he needs to work on. But other than that, this dude he's the best quarterback prospect in this draft. The number 2 player overall on my big board is Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State. He's the best receiver in this class. I, for a long time, had him at number 1 because he's the safest pick. He's not just like a safe pick. He's going to be good right away. He's going to be consistently good. This dude is going to be elite, and we know this from what we've seen. He is the most surefire player in this draft. You cannot miss with Marvin Harrison. He could fall a couple spots farther than we would expect, because teams are going to become calling up for quarterbacks, like the Vikings especially. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Cardinals traded down and that caused a run of 4 quarterbacks to start the draft, and then Harrison going at 5 either to the Chargers or via a trade up from another team. I would also not be surprised if the Cardinals just took him at 4. But Marvin Harrison I have at number 2. Drake May at number 3. I am way higher than him than most big boards would have him. Most big boards would probably have Neighbors or Odunze here. I have May here because I think he's the second best quarterback prospect. I think top 3 is where he's going to get drafted, but that's not part of this. I think he's going to be top 3. But I think May is as close as you can get to Caleb Williams. I think he would have been the number 1 pick last year. I would say the year before that for sure. I think he'd probably be the number 2 pick in the 2021 draft after Trevor Lawrence, because Trevor Lawrence was a special talent coming out of college. He'd probably be a little bit behind some of the guys in 2020 with that stacked quarterback class, and then he'd be ahead of Kyler Murray. I think he's a really good prospect, and he's my number 2 quarterback. A lot of people have Jaden Daniels over him. I disagree. I have Drake May at number 3. My number 4 player on the big board is Malik Neighbors, who is my second receiver, and this dude is a playmaker. Every single play you can see, there's a possibility this dude takes the ball and the run after catch ability pops up. The deep threat, he is capable of making a big play every time the ball is in his hands. If you get this man touches on your football team, he will make a difference for you, and he is a heck of a talent, and I like him here at number 4. My number 5 player is Rome Odunze, the receiver from Washington. He is very close to Neighbors. I think they're like 2A, 2B because Marvin Harrison's 1. And then I've actually seen some teams put Neighbors over Harrison, which I don't think is accurate, but I mean, Neighbors is a heck of a player. You can't really argue against the Neighbors part of it. You probably can argue that it is closer between Harrison and Neighbors, but you cannot argue that Harrison is number 2. I think that Neighbors and Odunze are probably closer in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But Odunze is a very different player compared to Neighbors. He's a big jump ball type of a guy who underrated speed. A lot of people just look at him and see, oh, he's a big body guy who's got really good ball tracking. He's not going to drop the ball at all. I think that Odunze is a heck of a player, and he's the most grown on player I've had. Earlier in the mock draft seasons, like right after the NFL season, I was really questioning why teams were mocking him as high after watching his film and like kind of I just looked at Neighbors and saw, oh, he's so explosive. Why is Odunze getting mocked ahead of him? And I'm kind of understanding it now why Odunze is so good. Jaden Daniels is my number 6. I thought about having him a little lower. Honestly, I probably could have put him a little lower, but for the sake of the video, we're going to have him at number 6 because he's a quarterback, and that obviously carries positional value. And he's my number 3 position quarterback off the board. I think he's going to go number 2 overall to the Commanders. All reports have suggested that, and it seems like May is going to be the number 3 pick, and Jaden Daniels will be number 2 to the Commanders. If you're looking for a guy that has multiple dimensions to his game and can do a lot of things, that is Daniels. May, I would say, is more of a consistent passer of the football, but there are some things that Daniels also has ahead of him in his skill set. My number 7 is one player that we have no clue where he's going to get drafted, and I could see him going top 10. I could see him falling to the late teens, and that is Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. He's the best tight end prospect that I've seen. It's really a debate between him and Kyle Pitts. Those two are a really good 2 tight ends coming out of college. I'd probably give the edge to Pitts because he's probably a little bit more of a receiving threat, a little bit more, but that's not saying that Bowers is a bad receiving threat, because I think Bowers' game is going to translate super well to the NFL. The way that he's able to block. A lot of people underestimate his blocking abilities, but he is such a good playmaker. What a pass catcher Brock Bowers was. Coming out of high school, his first year in Georgia, he was the number 1 target for Stetson Bennett on their national championship football team as a true freshman. It's unbelievable. He's going to fall a little bit because he's a tight end, but whoever takes him is not going to be disappointed. I can tell them that. Joe Alt is my number 8 player, my first offensive lineman here, my first offensive tackle. He's the best offensive tackle in my opinion. Most people would agree with me on this, that he's the number 1 offensive tackle. There are a little bit of concerns on his height, which is not it's not him being too short. It's actually him being too tall. He is 6'8.5". That is absurd for anybody in this league. He's a mammoth of a man. He's like, especially in height, but he's like 320, 330, which seems like a lot, but for offensive tackles, that may be about average. So, which is honestly kind of crazy. Such a good pass blocker. The tape, I actually had Olu Fashanu over him. He was one of my players that I dropped on my big board. I had them swapping places here, and I had Alt taking over that spot, and Alt was just phenomenal for Notre Dame last year. So at number 9, I have Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama. He really filled in the footsteps of Will Anderson last year. There were some questions on whether or not he was worthy of being that number 1 type of guy for Alabama on the outside. He's really a fit for a team that wants a 3-4 type of a player, a 3-4 edge rusher. He's not really as good of a fit for a 4-3 team. A team that likes to have DNs that put their hands in the dirt and get after the quarterback, but are also able to stop the run at a good rate. I think Dallas Turner is heck of a player, produced a lot last year, and it's not only that, it's also the fact that he can get so much better. The traits pop off, the speed coming off the edge, and he's still got a lot of things he can add to his game, as he's got a lot of tools he needs to refine some of his skills, like specific moves he still needs to work on. He's definitely not capped out, which is why I have him so high. At number 10, I have another edge rusher, that's Jared Verse. Pretty similar to Turner, except for I think he's more of a fit as a 4-3 guy. He's a bigger guy who is going to stop the run at a good rate too. He's got such a good story. If you guys haven't seen what his life before college was, or even his first year or two in college were before he even got to Florida State, you guys should definitely read into that. It's really a good story. You guys should pay attention to that and read up on it. But Florida State edge rusher Jared Verse caps off my top 10. At 11, I've got offensive tackle from Penn State. That is Olu Fashanu, and I thought about having him below Talise Fuaga, but personally I like him a little bit more because he's able to, I know for a fact he can play left tackle because he's played that in college. With Fuaga, he's only played right tackle, which is a concern because teams, when they take a tackle, they like to have a tackle that can play either spot, because a lot of times you play at right tackle, they try to put him at left tackle and it just doesn't work and it looks like a complete mess. If you're going to go with a guy who has unbelievable traits, he's such a good pass blocker. That's really what stands out in his game. He's such a good pass blocker. Defends against a lot of the good Big Ten pass rushers and has good games too. I'm a little higher on Olu than a lot of people are, but I think he's a heck of a player. At 12, I have Laiatu Latu, the edge from UCLA. Pretty interesting story, but the main concern with him is why he's going to go lower than 13, in my personal opinion, is because of his medical history. At one point, he was medically retired as a player. He's an older player at like 23. If you want a guy who is the perfect version of Trey Hendrickson, this is your guy. He's going to give you a lot of production with specific moves. He's not really going to give you a ton of production with just pure speed and athleticism. He's really just going to beat you with his techniques and skills. He's this high because of his skills, not really his traits, which is a little bit concerning because he doesn't have as much room to grow as other guys like Jared Verse and Dallas Turner. But overall, I think Laiatu Latu fits the number 12 spot. At 13, I have Brian Thomas Jr., the second receiver from LSU, and he's kind of been overshadowed by Malik Neighbors, who is an unbelievable talent. But Brian Thomas is really a really good X receiver, a guy who's very similar actually to Rome Odunze, but like he's not quite as good as Odunze. You look at the game, a lot of his catches are on the outside of the numbers, jump ball. He's one of those type of guys. And Jaden Daniels really liked to throw to him in college. At 14, I have my third offensive tackle. That is Talise Fuaga from Oregon State. He is the biggest riser on pretty much everybody's big boards. Before the mock draft started coming in, we didn't realize how much teams liked Fuaga. Teams like him. Teams really like Talise Fuaga. Before, we were seeing him as like a second round guy. Now he is going to be probably a mid first round guy. He had crazy year at Oregon State, which is just really boosted his stock. And number 15, I have another offensive tackle, J.C. Latham. Fun fact, he has unbelievable size hands. 11.5-inch hands. For reference, the other offensive tackle, the second one that we had on the board, Olu Fashanu, had 8.5 inches in his hands. This dude has gigantic hands. He's just a gigantic dude, honestly. He's probably not going to play very much left tackle in the NFL. He's more of a right tackle, as he played in college for Alabama. He's really just a good player, though, and I think he's probably a late teens guy where he's going to get picked because quarterbacks are valued. He'll probably fall a few spots because everybody will fall a few spots because quarterbacks are ridiculously valued. Teams are trading up just to make sure they have a guy for next year. J.C. Latham is my number 15 overall player. At 16, I have my first defensive tackle. That is Byron Murphy from Texas. Hear me out. His relative athletic score is very similar to Aaron Donald. Okay, now before you say, okay, now you just said he was Aaron Donald. A few years down the road, he's not going to be as good as Aaron Donald. People are going to be like, you said he was Aaron Donald. I said he's a similar player to Aaron Donald. As far as what we've seen, he's not going to be as good as Aaron Donald is. If he is 70% of Aaron Donald, he is a all-pro, absolute monster, 3-tech defensive tackle. He's not Aaron Donald, guys. He is a similar player to Aaron Donald. That's a fact. As far as his measurables, he is very similar. Lighter defensive tackle, 3-tech guy who gets to the quarterback. That is what I'm talking about. Not that he is as good, just to be clear. At 17, we have Troy Fautanu, the offensive tackle from Washington, who is very versatile. He can play guard or tackle. He played tackle in college, but some teams I know view him as a guard. People had concerns, especially going into the combine, about his arm size, which has been checked out. He's got 34-inch arms, which is plenty for an offensive tackle. So he will be a tackle unless a team prefer to have him play guard. I have him a little higher than I would like. I think he's not as good here, but just because he can play multiple positions, I think that gives him a higher ranking because he's more versatile. My next player at 18 is Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, cornerback, my first corner. He's another riser. He's just good. He's just really good. A lot of his game is projection, what he could translate to rather than what he has been. I think he is going to translate to a first-round player, and a team who drafts him will be happy taking him. At 19, I have another corner. That's Terrion Arnold from Alabama. With Arnold, he's a little bit of a smaller corner compared to a guy like Mitchell. He's smaller size and height. He was super productive at Alabama. I think he projects as kind of like a slot corner or an outside corner if you want to be you kind of want to stretch his abilities out a little bit. I think he's best suited as a slot corner, but I think Terrion Arnold is a heck of a player just behind Mitchell as my number 1 corner. Cooper DeJean has been rising over the last couple of weeks. He can play safety, but in college he played corner. He actually will give you a little bit of a kick/punt return ability. He's a white boy. He plays corner, safety, and kick returner and punt returner, which is a little weird if you think about it. Be honest, it's a little weird. You don't see it very often. It's abnormal. But if he's good, then throw him where he plays best and go with that. I think he's best suited as a corner, but he can also play safety if there's a team that picks him that wants him to play more of a safety role because they have plenty of corners, but maybe not a safety. I think he actually projects a lot like C.J. Gardner-Johnson. He can play all over the place on the secondary. I think that's very valuable. Jerzon Newton is my number 21 player, my second and final defensive tackle on this big board. I had him higher going into this purely because, okay, to be clear, he has not fallen. He has just not risen, if that makes sense. Byron Murphy was a riser, a real riser in this process, which by result knocked down Jerzon Newton's stock a little bit because he's the second defensive tackle instead of the first, which would obviously tank his value a little bit. But he's still really good. I think he's going to be highly impactful. He was semi-productive. He was productive enough from what you want out of a guy coming from college who plays less games. Interior guys probably take a little bit longer to get into the game as far as getting actual sacks. It's obviously harder to get sacks in the interior, but I think as players get more skills in their bag, I guess, they will start to develop into higher level players. Jackson Powers Johnson is a interior guy who can play guard or center from Oregon. Played center, and he should probably play center. I think he could actually drop out of the first round And I'm going to say that because I don't think it's likely, but I think I could actually see him dropping out of the first round because he's a center. Not because he's a bad player, but because his positional value is not as high compared to others. He's going to be the top center off the board first, but you'd rather pick a guy who can play tackle because that's just more of a valuable position. Because if you're a tackle, you're defending against edge rushers, whereas you're a center or a guard, you're defending against defensive tackles, which typically aren't as productive. So it's not as important that you have a franchise level guard or a franchise level center. But Jackson Powers Johnson could be just that. Chop Robinson at number 23 is the definition of a trait-based player. This guy has everything you look for but the numbers and the production. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the twitchiness, he's got the dip, he's got the hip flexibility, he's got everything but like the refined tools in the production at Penn State. Gets off the ball at an absolute, just really fast. He's either going to be one of those players where we look back and say, oh, this was a horrible draft, that your GM is fired, or this was a genius pick and we should probably give you an extension. He's going to be all or nothing in my mind. He's going to be absolutely unbelievable or horrible. Yeah, it's just one of those guys. My final quarterback on this list is Michael Penix. I have him higher than J.J. McCarthy, which is actually not a normal thing we've seen. We've seen McCarthy go higher. We've seen him projected to be better. I mean, it's probably because he's a lefty, to be honest. It's probably partially because he's a lefty, but I mean, that's probably just part of it. But it's also because he's an older guy and he got hurt a couple times with his ACL. Thankfully, he tested out fine at the combine injury-wise and seems like he's okay. We'll see in the long run if he's actually fine injury-wise. But as far as players, I think he's a top 25 player. To wrap this up, my last player here is Xavier Worthy from Texas. The by far most player that has gone up as far as big board rankings is Xavier Worthy, because this dude was mid to maybe second round talent, probably early second round. Now he's late first, early second. I think he's going to go late first. His speed is ridiculous, guys. 4.21 at the combine. He broke the record. He's going to be a speed demon. Wherever he goes, there's no denying speed, and he's got that. We'll see if the other things will be able to translate, but he could be better than some of the guys that I have ahead of him because he's just so fast. He could make up with some of his other things with just pure speed. That is the end of my video. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in episode number 12.